Mr. Vice President, 75 years ago, in the aftermath of the most appalling of conflicts, the architects of the UN Charter carved out 3 pillars of cooperation with which we would build a better, a safer, and more equal future. Today, the United Kingdom remains steadfastly committed to working with all of you to maintain peace and security, foster development, and promote and protect human rights, just as the authors of the Charter envisaged. Mr. Vice President, they knew that states that respect human rights create the conditions for societies that are more secure, societies that are more prosperous, societies that are better equipped to meet the needs of their people. And that is why, to this day, respect for human rights remains at the heart, rightly, of the international system. And that is why, in 2020 and beyond, the United Kingdom will place the promotion and protection of human rights at the top of our list of international priorities. As a global force for good, we will continue to uphold and defend the international rule of law, the values of liberal democracy, and the rights and freedoms of citizens around the world. As a demonstration of that very commitment to international human rights, the United Kingdom will seek re-election to the Council later this year, and we look forward to your support. As our then Foreign Secretary, now our Prime Minister, said to this very Council in June 2018, we can and we could solve many of the world's most serious problems and achieve virtually every sustainable development goal by 2030. How? If every girl in the world had at least 12 years of quality education. We will strain with every sinew to achieve that very goal, whilst also striving to end sexual violence in conflict and violence against all women and girls. Your Excellencies, Mr. Vice President, we also pledge to stand up for freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion or belief, to protect the rights of persecuted minorities, to defend media freedom, to stand up for journalists and other media workers, and also support other civil society groups that hold the powerful rightly to account. In that regard, I commend to this Council the statement published today by the Media Freedom Coalition, co-chaired by ourselves, the United Kingdom and Canada. The statement outlines the collective intent of coalition members to take action on individual cases and situations of concern, to speak out publicly, and to provide support for those advocating for media freedom. The United Kingdom will also implement a new autonomous human rights sanctions regime to punish those who violate and abuse human rights. And finally, as co-host of this year's crucial UN Climate Summit, COP26, we will strive to raise global ambitions and commitments on tackling climate change and its potential impacts on the enjoyment of human rights. Mr. Vice President, despite the commitment and efforts of many in this chamber, we know that millions of people around the world continue to be deprived of their rights and freedoms. In Syria, human rights continue to be violated and abused every day, with the regime the main perpetrator. We are gravely concerned about the reckless offensive by Syrian and Russian forces in Idlib, in which hospitals, schools, and first responders, innocent civilian lives, have come under attack. Those responsible for these violations of international humanitarian law must be held to account. In Myanmar and Bangladesh, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims and other ethnic minorities, many who have survived violence, including sexual violence, remain stranded, from their homes. It is therefore incumbent the authorities in Myanmar must implement the provisional measures required by the International Court of Justice, together with the recommendations made by the Rakhine Advisory Commission and the Independent Commission of Inquiry. In Iran in November, we saw the most deadly crackdown against internal political dissent since 1979 and a near total shutdown of the internet. Faith groups have also been targeted. We urge the Iranian authorities to release those detained and to respect freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief. In North Korea, reports of serious and wide-ranging human rights violations continue to emerge. We again call on the North Korean government to work with this Council to address them. And finally, in China, over 1 million Uyghurs have been extrajudicially detained, and there are systematic restrictions on Uyghur culture and the practice of Islam. We call on China to allow the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights unfettered access to the region. Mr. Vice President, there are times, and I'm sure I speak for many in this room and beyond, when the human rights picture across the world looks bleak, when the violations and abuses we see are too heartbreaking, when the challenges for this very Council seem too great. At such times, if we ever doubt our ability to achieve our goals, our collective goals, we must remember all that we have achieved together over the last 75 years, from the bleakest and darkest of beginnings. Together, we have built a human rights framework based on the principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, a system that can hold perpetrators of the worst human rights violations and abuses to account. And importantly, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a system that can support governments across the world to improve their own human rights record. So, in the face of every new challenge, we should not lose heart. We should recognize the great value of this very Council and the wider human rights system and encourage all states to engage openly with it. And above all else, we should remember that there are countless individuals, millions of people around the world, whose rights and freedoms are being violated and abused every single day. The world's most vulnerable people. And what do they hope for? Who do they rely upon? This very Council to ensure their voice is heard, their suffering is exposed. So, Your Excellencies, by working together in this chamber and beyond, I am confident we will ensure that these most vulnerable of people, persecuted individuals around the world, and others, can be provided the hope they need, that ultimately they too can enjoy their human rights, that they too can live in the safety and freedom, and they too can contribute to the well-being and prosperity of their country and the wider world. That is surely, ultimately, a goal that we should all continue to fight for, to strive for. And let me assure you of this, my country, the United Kingdom, is committed to doing just that. Not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but into the future. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to those vulnerable countless millions out there, and we owe it to our future generations. Thank you.